Sara Ducey earned her Bachelor's of Science in Plant and Soil Science from the University of Massachusetts and a Master's of Science in Human Nutrition from Michigan State. She has been teaching nutrition for Montgomery College since 1990. Sara served as coordinator of MC's Women's Studies program from 2000 to 2002 and is course coordinator for more than 20 sections of the Food Management 103 Introduction to Nutrition course. In addition to her teaching and research, Sara mentors several student clubs.
Thank you very much, Mimi. We'll be ready in a moment. There we go. Good evening. Thanks for hanging with us. My presentation is called Evolutionary Nutrition, How Race Matters, which is a little riff on Cornel West's book, which is really worth a read, by the way, for those of you who have just a few extra hours. It is short and remarkably thoughtful. Let's see if I can manage this. I have always wanted to do the Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship. Years ago, I stumbled on one of the poster sessions they were having at the Tacoma Park campus. I think it may have been one of the first years they were doing it. And I said, oh, this I will do. And I think some of you know that sometimes life gets in the way, schedules, you could be free in the fall but not in the spring, or all those kinds of crazy things. And the moment had never really come for me. But there's a message here in my next bullet point, which is I received an email encouraging me to apply. That email came from Amanda Truitt, who is sitting up here. And that she did not just as the coordinator of this program, but as a person who really loves her experience that she's had with this and seeing how rich an experience it was. And she said, I think this would be a terrific thing for you. And so I said, okay. I got online and I looked at the upcoming year's announcement, and it says, Museums at a Crossroads, Engaging a Post-Racial Society. And I went, I teach nutrition. And I was really struggling with how am I to marry this, what is an intriguing topic, but we're supposed to write a proposal, and by the way, it is a competitive process, and you really got to write a proposal. And how am I to say, what am I going to do with nutrition and race and racism and post-racial society? And so but I was not going to give up, so you know how this goes. I get back online and I start doing research. And I'm going to just do this. Thank you. So I need you to know that it didn't take me long before I found my first hook. And it's a battle between two nutrients. And these nutrients are folate, which is a really important B vitamin, and vitamin D. And vitamin D happens to be very famous in the last several years. So everybody here is like, oh yeah, that's the one you make with sun. So I had my hook, and here's just the very first part of it. But in fact, you know this story because you've heard a lot of it tonight, and those of you who were here in the earlier session heard some more about this, that all humans share origins. We're all from Africa. And that part of what you may not know is that originally we were all light pigmented, but we were very hairy. We were adorable, I'm sure. And, but this is an evolution story, and it's about global climate change. And the climate changed, and the climate became more intense, and it was so hot that the people who had less hair and had more sweat glands actually were more effective at dealing with this hotter environment. And over time, the people who were most effective were those who had less hair and could deal with this more intense environment. The problem was that as the hair was lost, this very pale pigmented people, these peoples were vulnerable in a way they had not been vulnerable before. And that was that the folate, which is a B vitamin, and it circulates through your blood, just all your nutrients are just cruising around in there. But when your blood circulates through your skin, ultraviolet light does penetrate your skin. It actually goes through your skin, and it destroys folate. And when you don't have enough folate, you can't be effective at reproduction. And to give you an example, I think some of you know the word or the phrase spina bifida, which is a failure of the spine to be built effectively during development. Folate deficiency is one reason why you might have that problem. Okay? So if you can't build a baby correctly, this is really a problem, and that there would be an evolutionary pressure to push you to do something a little bit differently. And where we ended up was pigment. More pigment. And so these pale people became more heavily pigmented. And then we had successful reproduction. Problem solved. But as we all know, people didn't stay in Africa. Many peoples over different years, and you know, still arguing about who left where and went when, and this is an ongoing story. It's one of the most exciting things for our students is that you can just say, well, what was in the press this week about who left Africa when? Okay, it's newsy, it's wonderful. And some peoples went further north, away from equatorial Africa, into areas where there was much less ultraviolet light. And ultraviolet light is required to make vitamin D. And these dark pigmented peoples who went away from the sun suddenly were at risk. And again, there was a pressure. And the ones who were able to have the lightest skin and to make enough vitamin D for their survival were the ones that moved on. And so we had a change in pigmentation. So I had my hook. And that was pigment. And pigment really plays a role in this word, this phrase, evolutionary nutrition. And this was wonderful in my experience. You know, I didn't talk a lot about evolution in the class. I made it clear that it's real. You know, we learned a little bit about it. But what's interesting is this pigment story is one of the best tools for talking about evolution, because every single person in my classroom, everyone in this room, actually has the story of evolution in the color of their skin. We all responded to environmental changes and the environment in which we were. So I knew that my proposal and that my work would go into this area of evolutionary nutrition, and it was really looking at a couple of things, how the environment is changing us. And the other piece is really very exciting, is how the foods that we choose to eat alter us. And I think some of you know that it really required eating animals in order to get our bigger, more capable brains. And it's one of the reasons why I promote eating animals. And if you could put a different name under my picture, if you put this on TV. All right, so again, having a little fun with Cornell West, now I say pigment matters. And the reason pigment matters, and the reason this all ties back to race, is that at least in the United States, we really do have this pigment-based system of, oh, you're dark, therefore you are, or you're light, therefore you are. And I thought this was a wonderful little pathway or segue into discussions of race. And I just wanted to make it clear to you, in case you didn't know that I know, that there is no such thing as human races. We are one people. And there are lots of great songs about that too. So now I can tell you what my goals were. First, I knew that I had to have a new knowledge base, and I was focused initially, I mean really initially, all around this evolutionary nutrition. And I thought that that would really be what I did, and I would have been happy with that, but it wasn't enough. I would say that the thing, bullet point 2 here, develop my teaching skills, particularly around the issues of race and racism, is not what I expected really to do. I thought I was going to be able to play this game of, I'm talking about food, I'm talking about, you know. And I really embraced this work around race and racism. And I found that this was the area where I really had the strongest changes in what I do in the classroom, how I do it, and the meaning that it brought for me and for my students. I wanted to get my students out of the classroom. I am an experiential learner myself. I'm all about the field trip. I was a field trip kid. I ran Girl Scout troops for years. I'm all about the field trip. I think if we only did field trips, we would live happily ever after. You guys want to do stuff in the classroom, that's fine, go ahead. But what was funny was this real world phrasing here. This is what my students told me, and they told me the museum, and I know we heard in the earlier session, Takiko was saying, well, the museum is not real, they are representations. But I have to tell you, my students feel that the museum is the real world, and it's because they have stepped out of this other part of their world that is in the classroom that I think feels artificial to them in some ways. The last thing that I knew all along that I wanted to do, but I had no idea how wonderful it would be, was to participate fully in this unique and collaborative community. It is true that we are, the 2010 cohort, feel remarkably close. We learned a lot from each other. We were brave with each other. And we love each other. And that was way more than I ever expected. So what's new in my class? I did what I said I was going to do. I have some new pieces around evolutionary nutrition. I have to say, way underdeveloped from what I imagined I would do, because the other things really pushed and displaced that so that I could do more in race. I added some new pieces. They had to watch a 15-minute video by Nina Jablonski. She is a PhD anthropologist. She trained at Bryn Mawr, where my daughter went. where your sister went. Nina Jablonski is so cool, and my students felt that she was so cool, and she was so authoritative and so smart and so creative and so critical in her thinking. And it's 15 minutes. It's a YouTube TED video, and I think everyone in the room should watch it. It was magical. I made them do some work outside of class with Dr. Michael Hollick. I'll speak to that in a moment. I directed them to a specific website that the American Anthropology Association has pulled together. It's called Understanding Race. I've capitalized the U and the R so you can see the word. Otherwise, your brain will read it as Understanding Grace. So it's race. I did have everyone in the class. I can't swear that they've done all these things, okay, just to be clear. They were directed to also look at the Smithsonian website specific to the exhibit that we went to. Now, we also, like Andrea did, we went to the David, is it Koch or Koch? Koch, David Koch Hall of Human Origins, which is, it's a masterful exhibit, and there's a lot there. And that is where we went, and we made a lot of progress. This is Nina Jablonski, the anthropologist. She's very electric. She's good TV, let's say. And the map here on the left is just one of the maps that gives you a sense for where people of pigment are, historically. And she would show you then in her video maps that NASA has done from satellites looking at where the ultraviolet light falls. And when you line these two maps up, it's just like, ta-da! So we really are just our environments, which gets us back to evolution, which is so cool. This is Dr. Hollick. He's actually highly controversial. He's all kinds of fun. His video runs almost an hour, and I have used it in the classroom before, but I'll tell you, from my perspective, his work on vitamin D is so important to my students' nutrition work that it's sort of like no matter what the name of my nutrition course is, they're going to see this movie. But I learned long ago that I can do this as a backup if there's some disaster. I could just boom, and they can watch it in class. But I prefer to have them do this work outside of class. Some of you wonder, how do we jam all this new stuff in? Make them do it on their own time. And don't apologize for it, because they're supposed to be doing how many hours outside the classroom? They're not doing it. All the research says they're not doing it. Make them do it. And then give them a questionnaire so that they can bring it back as a document. I was working on developing my teaching skills, especially, as I said, around race and racism, and I couldn't do this alone. This work I could not have done alone. This was all about teamwork. This was all about people bringing their own stories, about bringing their own experiences, about sharing teaching strategies, and that cohort experience is just unparalleled. It's just not anywhere else like this. We met many times over the 2 academic semesters. Many of you in the room know the structure of the Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship, but we start in the spring with the museum visits, and then work really hard through the fall with our implementation. And it actually did take us until about midway through the fall before I think we really broke through on trust, trusting each other enough to race and racism are very tough topics, and even the people within our cohort had very different experiences with it. And it's a difficult topic even in a closed, tight, trusting community. I didn't know enough about the history, and I was very thankful to the historians in our cohort for helping us out. I just felt like, I was like, oh my God, this is a history class as well as everything else. And if I could find a moment, I would take a couple of classes from some of these colleagues. And I think everyone benefited from these new teaching techniques. I do want to speak specifically about how my teaching has changed and how the material that I'm working in the classroom, and that is that I would never have done race and racism before. I couldn't really justify wedging it into a nutrition science class. I just need you to understand that felt clumsy to me. And I didn't have the courage to do it. I didn't have the training, and I think you actually, I wouldn't stop you from going there without training, but I would just tell you it's a whole lot easier when you've had people actually work through exercises. Takiko, who is also in our cohort, actually says she brings a whistle to class when she talks about race and blows this whistle when it gets too wild, okay? But she's willing to go there. She just takes her whistle. But I had never done this before, and it was this exact experience, this teamwork, that allowed me to feel comfortable, and I will do it again. There was one particular exercise that I brought from the cohort right into my classroom where students were learning about prejudice, and it was really as simple as, you give them 5 minutes or 4 minutes, you say, everybody here, take a piece of paper, write down on a piece of paper, describe you, like what is your cohort, who is your group? So just write that down. Now write down 4 or 5 ways that other people have negative stereotypes about you and your group. They could do this pretty quickly. I didn't say race or ethnicity or anything else, so people didn't, you know, I could say I'm tall, I'm a girl. I didn't necessarily have to say what my heritage is. People identified in a lot of different ways, but it was amazing how rapidly they could identify the negative stereotypes about every single group, every single person in the room. There was a stereotype against their people. And then they had the opportunity, if they wished, to report, here's who I am, and here's what my stereotypes are. And I'll tell you, when the whistle blew, one young man actually was a little bit reticent to speak, and I said, tell us who you are. And he said, in a very quiet voice, Pakistani. And someone across the room shouted out, terrorist. Predicting the stereotype. Whistle. So you need some skills building around going there, all right? Now, here's what surprised me. I guess, you know, sometimes when we do things, it's like an academic exercise. We'll try this out, we'll see how it goes. So it was an academic exercise, I tried it out, and what I found was my students were not only willing to go there to talk about race and racism, and in fact we did go into the discussion of post-racial society, but they actually needed it. They were comfortable with this, and they were engaged in it, and in one of my sections we could have gone on for a really long time, okay? And nobody said, why are we doing this in nutrition? They were just in there with me, and nobody challenged me like, this doesn't belong here. Oh, you thought I'd never talk about the museum. We had to meet at the Elephant in the National Museum of Natural History. I have to say that very slowly to get it in the right order. There were a number of my students who reported to me that they had never before been to any of the Smithsonian museums, period. I will actually ask the question differently next time. I didn't ask that question, they offered that. I would really like to know how many of my students have never been, and I think we should add this to our questionnaire. A lot of them use this real world thing. They were like, actually one comment was very funny. It's like, basically, it was really good to see this in the real world because then I knew my teacher knew what she was talking about. It was like, they were using this to confirm what they learned in the classroom, but that's okay, it was just sort of cute. So a lot of connections were made, and many expressed, I wish we'd had more time. I wish, you know, I wish we could go back again. I want, you know, so they wanted more, and in fact, you know, this is always crazy. I gave them a multi-page questionnaire, which one person actually called a scavenger hunt, which I hadn't really thought of it as a scavenger hunt. And they said, couldn't you give us more pages so we would have to look at more things? All right. One of my students said that she was really glad to learn that we are all one race. My student is white, and she said, my boyfriend of 3 years is black. We get a lot of negative looks and feedback from people, and it was reassuring to know we're the same. Another said, the Smithsonian was a great experience for me because I got to learn about race, how we are all 99.9% identical. If information like this was shared with the world, maybe there would be less racism. Another said, well, discussion on race was interesting, but moreover, visiting the museum enhanced my understanding because the museum shows that humans are 99% alike. And the last one was just cute, you know. It was an amazing experience, and I totally recommend it to others. I think we should advertise our Smithsonian classes, like branding, you know, and have people beg to get in our classes. I just have a few thoughts for colleagues, and this would be especially true for people who have not embarked on the fellowship program and are just sort of sitting on the fence thinking about it. These are all yeses. Yes, you can wedge more content and these wonderful experiences into your course. Yes, your students can manage to do more assignments, and you don't necessarily have to take more assignments out, except I'll remind you, you have to grade them, that's all. They do love the museums, overwhelming, that's just very, very positive around the experience. The only negative experience we had was that, and this probably happens once in a blue moon, the museum was actually closed when we got there. They'd had a disastrous water main break near the museum, which had shut down the museum on that day. It was just like this blink in time that we just all were sitting there in the steps patiently for a museum that would not open. So I got some commentary around, you know, the only thing I would change was make sure the museum is open. But they loved it. Many of them brought friends and family. I told them it's not safe to travel anywhere alone. You shouldn't be on Montgomery College campus alone. You shouldn't be in your own home alone. Take a friend, have a buddy, just adventure. Take enough money to eat. If you don't have money, bring food in your pockets. And yes, you can find a way. Many of our themes for some of our faculty seem a little heady or scary. And I want you to know, if I could do this, we could find a lot of ways to put some things together. And the Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship here at Montgomery College is the best experience I've had as far as professional growth and development, as far as that teaming, that collegial kind of experience that frankly I don't get enough of here. And I've been teaching here for, as Ada pointed out, a really long time. So this is the coolest thing we have. And thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah. And our next speaker will be...
Did your students go to the museum by themselves, or did you meet them there?
I had 2 days planned, a Saturday and a Sunday, to go there. Our Saturday failed. I had 2 days that we went, a Saturday and a Sunday. The Saturday the museum was closed unexpectedly for a water main break. So then I went the Sunday, and then all the people that had come on Saturday, which was actually quite a few, I had 60 students go across 2 classes. I could not be with each person. I was just simply there as a, where's the restroom? Where's this part of the exhibit? What does this mean? So I stayed in one place. That's not ideal. It would be much better if I were touring with them and guiding them. Given the numbers, it was not possible.